it's how you react to that proves how good you are and what your value is to that client. So those moments of truth are important, and I talk to our people about that. Is this a moment of truth? We've got a client that's in trouble here. They've called us.
My guest today is Tom Laundy. He's the Director for Health Services at William Buck here in South Australia.
My advice would be not to wait too long. People are more invested in their careers in terms of the direction that they're on. They take more control earlier than what they used to.
He's a well-rounded and enthusiastic professional with a genuine care for his clients.
Having an interest in helping people and a genuine interest in business itself, there's a combination of those things that is what drove me.
Becoming a director at 29 is a true testament to his technical excellence and drive.
That's the perspective that you take whenever you go up a step in your career. Like you strive for it, and then you get to that point and it's like, okay, now what? Now I've actually got to live up to what it is that I was after.
Tom is recognised and sought out for his expertise in helping health professionals with tax, business planning and superannuation advice.
Hi, my name's Tom Laundy and I'm a director of William Buck in Adelaide. Today, Sarah's interviewing me for the Accountants on Purpose podcast. Hope you join in.
Hi, I'm Sarah Bartholomew's from U Legal. The Accountants on Purpose podcast showcases inspiring accountants who are leaders in their field.
And then it just came to me like a bolt of blue.
What makes them tick?
Love it.
How did they get to where they are?
I want to inspire.
And what do they do now for their teams, their clients, and the world? Favourite movie of all time?
Well, favourite movie of all time, I'd have to say, is the original Point Break.
Oh, that's a good movie.
Yeah, Keanu Reeves, Patrick Swayze, surfing, crime, extreme sports. It's got it all.
It does have it all.
I haven't seen it for a long time, but absolutely love it. Love it so much that I didn't want to devalue my memory by going back and watching the new one.
Oh, has it been redone?
Yeah, it has.
Like all the Disney movies?
Yeah, a lot like every movie. Like every 80s movie's come back around.
Yeah, they're doing Top Gun too.
And I'm going to watch that though.
Okay. The original Point Break could be a good one for a rainy Sunday.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I watched The Shawshank Redemption last week. First movie I've seen, I reckon, this year.
Yeah.
I was reminded how good that is too.
It's a long one. It's good for a rainy day.
Absolutely.
What was the most transformative travel experience you've ever had and what made it so?
Well, thought about this and thought back to 2007, which was at that stage in my life. It was just before I was made a director of the firm, and I felt like it was a bit of freedom that I was looking for before I started down that path. And my now wife, then girlfriend, went through the Europe and the UK. And at that point, I hadn't really had a real thirst for travel, but once we got over there and experiencing all those different cultures in such a short travel of such a short distance, it just showed me how isolated we are here, and how much there is to experience in the world and how big the world truly is. So that was fantastic for that. And even though I describe myself as a bit reluctant initially, I really thought that was great. And I remember a lot of those places now, and one day I'm sure we'll get back to them, perhaps take our kids.
That's so interesting. I think there's a lesson in that for things that you feel reluctant about. I remember for our engagement party, my dad gave us some money. He was living in England at the time.
Yep.
And I said to my husband, now husband, then fiance, let's go to Barcelona.
Yeah.
And he was reluctant. He was like, what am I going to like here? And basically the answer to that is everything, like the food, the late nights, the culture. So
sounds pretty hard not to like.
Similar experience.
I also found that there was a place in Switzerland called Lucerne.
Yeah.
And even though we didn't have any, huge event happening while we were there, it's just such a beautiful place. I thought, living here would just be amazing. Magic. I could afford to live there for a week, I think, and I'd be out. But it was just a beautiful, beautiful spot, and I'd love to get back there one day.
Take the kids.
Yeah, take the kids. They might ruin it, but we'll see.
You're a Director of Health Services and Business Advisory at William Buck for South Australia. Describe the road or roads that you took to get to that destination.
Sure. So in terms of the road to director, I've thought back as to what it was that really pushed me down that path. And I think a lot of it had to do with how keen I was to expand my client base. I think I had quite a natural ability to build trust and to build relationships, and that's important in our game. You're managing a series of clients. You're trying to get new clients. Your ability to be able to stretch yourself over a number of people's different affairs and what's happening. I feel like there's a real knack in that, and I think I displayed a good knack at that early, and a willingness to do extra things to attract clients, which I didn't think at that time was a very common trait in people.
Yes.
I think we're after that as an ability now more so in our younger people than perhaps what we used to be.
Then, yeah.
And it was a lot more then about the, if you like, the accounting and tax work.
Doing
the doing. And I think the future is about more than that, and we're trying to recognise that in our people. And I think that's what set me apart. Was that
you were
I had
ahead of the curve.
Yeah, potentially ahead of a curve. And I knew at that stage that I was never going to be the most talented technically. That was never my interest. I like dealing with people, and I thought, well, what's the best way to deal with people? I'd love to build a client base of vastly different people, vastly different backgrounds at that stage, vastly different businesses, but having an interest in helping people and a genuine interest in business itself. There's a combination of those things that is what drove me at that time. And I think it was also a recognition of the fact that I felt like I was always going to be a better director than I was an accountant. Managing
you were
relationships.
always kind of going for that.
I felt like that. And I thought, well, the quicker I get there, the better. So that was part of my road to get to that point.
So you've worked at William Buck now for 18 years.
I know.
What
yes.
keeps the passion alive?
Well, a few different things. I mean that client element and being able to elevate myself and the firm towards the trusted advisor position. We talk about that a lot because that's not something you can just purchase.
Create.
It's something that you've got to commit to, and it's something that you can build through experience that you've got with a client. But if it's a newer client, you don't have that history to call upon. You've got to create that and demonstrate that you've been there before, that you've seen it. And I like forging those relationships, and again, building my knowledge in business to be able to help other people. We were talking before we started about the importance of network, and I've always tried to have an open network with my clients, introducing clients to each other where I see a need, where there's synergies, where they can get a good service, because people are after that. People don't want to go through the white pages or go on the internet to find a provider. They want a recommendation. So that's a part of what I look to provide too. In terms of the health services part of it, the health is one of the areas that our firm specialises in, and that was an area that I thought I could add some value to. Had some clients in the space at the time, liked dealing with those clients, and have built on that since that time, and like the health services industry. So that's a bit about how I've got into what I've got into.
Cool. You became a director when you were 29, which seems to me very young, and is definitely a testament to your expertise. How did you prove yourself to the decision makers, do you think?
Again, I had a lot to do with my commitment at that time. I mean, there's no substitute for hard work. To building a practice. One of the things that I did that I felt like was something specific that set me out was that in building my network and being able to lay down some foundations for the future, I started a younger professional networking series, which was fantastically supported by the firm. They paid for the grog and they put everything on, and that was great. And it was a way for me to be able to bring people to the firm that I thought, gee, that might be that person looks like they know what they're doing. I'd like to get to know a bit more about what they're doing. Let's get them along with something, and that was my excuse. So it was as simple as that.
But then you also set yourself up as a leader.
Yep.
Amongst your peers.
Yes.
In doing that.
Yes, I did. Part of that was
even
also,
if it was just for like free drinks with your friends.
Yeah, that was unashamedly how I'd advertised it to get them there in the first place. But it was a bit more than that. I was able to do some presentations that I thought were applicable to people of my age demographic at that time, to say, well, these are the things.
Have necessarily had similar opportunities.
No. Well,
hear about.
I didn't think so. They were pretty basic things, and it wasn't this is what William Buck can do for you. It was this is what I think you're encountering in your life, and they might be career-driven things that happen in people's organisations, challenges that they've got. And just how you set up your life financially, pretty basic stuff.
But important.
And I think that was something that stood out, perhaps compared to what was happening at the time in the firm, and that's sort of what started me at that young age. And plus, I've been really fortunate to work in a firm that recognised talent and ability rather than just experience, and I've seen that since, and that for me was very much a pay it forward perspective to take, because we've had a lot of other people that have benefited from that along the way, and our track record.
That's
in
probably
developing
also
young people.
one of the benefits of having you as a young director, because that is diversity at work. You see something different than people who've been a director for years.
Yes.
As a younger director, I think.
Yeah, well, I hope so.
Bring that to the table.
Yeah, that's right. And I felt like in the first few years after that happened, I felt every bit of 29. Like I felt like I was out of my depth at the board table, and perhaps a little bit more cautious in sharing opinions, even ones that were different from others. But I quickly got the confidence to do that. But was certainly very conscious of not overstepping my mark early on. And I guess that's the perspective that you take whenever you go up a step in your career. Like you strive for it, and then you get to that point, and it's like, okay, now what? Now I've actually got to live up to what it is that I was after.
Yes.
And I think I spent a couple of years just grappling with that a bit. I think I did it pretty successfully, but I felt it.
Yeah.
I felt it.
So that might be considered a bit of an obstacle to overcome. Have you had any other obstacles in your career that you've had to overcome?
Yeah, I have. I felt a bit like I needed to identify what it was about me that I knew was potentially a shortcoming to be able to work around it. And a couple of themes that I've pulled out of that I describe as obstacles over the year. I'm a pretty impatient person naturally, and a lot of my impatience sort of came out in my late 20s before I was made a director, because I was in a hurry, more of a hurry than potentially I should have been. But equally, that's was something
hindsight.
that drove me. Yeah, hindsight. that did drive me forward. So I needed to have some outlets to be able to discuss that. I guess that perspective of impatience that I had, because I didn't want that to be how other people viewed me as he's a bit of a pain, he's impatient. There's an element of that that's great, and we talk a lot in our business about having a sense of urgency, and being able to get things done, being able to meet that client's expectations and to beat them. So some of that's great, but if you've got too much of that impatience, that can translate into frustration.
Yeah.
So certainly nothing wrong with having it, but try and manage it.
At Facebook, they say move fast and break things. That's kind of their mantra. But
Right.
it doesn't really work in professional services.
I think, as I said,
I like the move fast, but in professional services, you do have to be accurate. And
yeah, you do, and
sometimes that takes time.
It does take time, and you do need to remember that you're serving your client, and you need to be pretty clear on what the client wants from you. And I guess that was something else that I was able to get right pretty early, was asking questions of clients that perhaps others wouldn't ask. Things like, how do you want me to communicate with you? Are you an email person? Is it better if I call you? What are the things that? And it's amazing how some of the small things are what carry a relationship. And in our business, we talk a lot about moments of truth. So you might have a client that potentially gets the same thing from you for a few years, but then something will happen in that client's business, and they're like, right, well, we need some help. We'll call Tom. It's how you react to that proves how good you are and what your value is to that client. So those moments of truth are important, and I talk to our people about that. Is this a moment of truth? We've got a client that's in trouble here. They've called us because they've breached their debt covenants. Yep. And the bank sent them a letter, and they've got a meeting next week. Right. Well, this is now our number one priority, because this is what our clients expect, and this is a moment of truth. So I feel like keeping a lookout for those things, having an understanding of how your client wants to relate with you, that builds that trust quickly.
Definitely.
And that's important because it's somewhat easier when you've known a client for a long period of time. But when you're trying to build that quickly, you've got to find a way to get to that and draw upon that experience to demonstrate, hey, I've been here before. I can help you with this. This is what happened. And I think that theme of storytelling, I've had a client in this situation, obviously having regard for privacy and those related issues, but I've been here before. This is how we've handled it.
Yeah.
This is the outcome that you're likely to get to, but we need to get there quickly. And this is the best way to handle it. And you can see how much of a difference that makes in terms of, I guess, placating the panic the client might have, and then just that reassuredness that this is my trusted advisor. This is where we need to go. They've seen this before.
Yeah.
So that's where I really feel like those moments of truth are just so important. It's easy to be a good advisor when things are going well, a bit harder when something's afoot.
Yeah, it's funny. I had an experience this week with a client who's panicking about something going a certain way after we gave them some advice. And I was like, what do I do? And Daniela in my team just said, look, we don't always get people when they're at their best. Because they are under extreme pressures and we only know the ones they're telling us about.
Yeah, that's right.
So always remembering that is important too.
Absolutely. And cutting them some slack.
Yeah.
And when they're in that mode, I mean, I've been in that mode before in our business, and I think that's one of the perspectives that's really valuable, is having been an owner of a business for a longer period of time. You've experienced some of those things. You know what that's like. You can talk at eye level.
And not taking it on yourself as well.
Not taking it on yourself. I mean, I say that, but sometimes
I know
that's something, we're talking about obstacles, things that happen in the work environment that you tend to take on personally, like it's a personal attack. And not sleep. I mean, great for me to say that, but I know that I've struggled with that at different times before. And what I have noted that I've done in the past is sometimes I've taken work problems home and been thinking about that, and that's quite obvious in my behaviour at home. I've tried to, the first step in trying to deal with that is in recognising it, and then finding a way to break that cycle. That is not easy.
No.
That's something I talk about as a constant challenge.
It is.
It's not as though it's an obstacle that's bubbled up and I've gone, well, I had that and now I handle that perfectly. I still struggle with that one, but I think there's an element of that that's helpful. If you're able to walk out of the office each night and then walk home in a perfectly good mood, and you can just set aside everything what's happened during the day, good on you.
I've got a friend who says when his garage door goes down, he's off from work.
Yeah, that's good.
Like, how can I do that?
How can you do that? I mean, it sounds wonderful. I'm not sure if that's me.
I know.
And it's worse when you're in business, I reckon.
Your expertise lies in the healthcare sector.
Yes.
And I love that you say you have genuine care and empathy for your clients. Did you learn to have that quality, or is it something that you think comes naturally to you?
I think it comes naturally, and perhaps others have learnt it over the time. But it's certainly for me, it's been natural. I mean, I sometimes think about what personality traits I've got outside of work that translate to value inside of work, and that genuine care is one of those things. I find myself sometimes anticipating things, wonder how someone's felt after this has happened, and I'll give them a call.
Check in.
It's the same thing with clients. If I know what's happened, I'll check in and call. I think it's a very difficult thing to fake for a long period of time. People can sense that you're being ingenuine, and I feel like if that's you, then people will see that pretty quickly. And it's, as I said, it's just, you got a pretty long career ahead of you if that's your attitude. You really got to care about what those clients are doing, and I mean, in terms of, and that's an important point to raise, is recognising what it is you're good at, and how you get yourself in the right position to maximise what it is that you're good at. So I've felt all the way along like it's client relationships, what's happening with clients. That's what I'm passionate about. That's what I'm really genuinely interested in. We've got other people who have been down a technical path where they recognise that that's where their skills lie, and that's the best way to maximise their strengths. So it's not the same for everyone, but I guess if there's any advice in that, it's to consider what it is, truly
Know your
drives you
strengths.
forward.
Yeah.
Know your strengths, but don't be afraid to change your current reality to fit those strengths. And that's something that I've seen to be universally true, because if you're not in the right spot, eventually that'll find a way to work its way out, whether it's frustration, whether you change jobs. Try and get to that point where you recognize what it is that you're good at, what are your strengths, and get yourself in that spot where you're getting the most out of it.
And there's so many great personality tests you can do that help with that. There's the Myers-Briggs one.
Yes.
Tony Robbins has a free disc one on his website.
Yep.
So that's I think that's a good one. But yeah, that's probably know yourself is important.
One of the things I can remember that came out was we did 360-degree appraisals.
Oh, that would have been even more interesting.
It was, it was, and I thought to myself, gee, I wonder what people think of me, and I needed to remember when I read my feedback at the time, that one of the cash cries of our office is that we need to remember that bad trumps good, and what we mean by that is just remember that you're drawn to the negative feedback that you get. If someone tells you 10 things, one of them is negative and 9 of them are positive, you remember the one. So we said this to everyone, remember when you're reading your feedback about these 360-degree appraisals, that you take on both the good and the bad. But
and how did you go?
I think I did okay. There are a couple of comments in there that were about my impatience, and how if things are not going along the line that I expect them to, then potentially that means that I might lose interest. So they're things that I really thought about myself. But when they're
reflected back to you.
Yeah, you think, oh, gee, that is right. I need to work on that.
Well,
so from that perspective, it was
it's a good segue because you're the Director for People and Culture at William Buck.
Yes.
So what do you think is different for today's graduates than was when you first started out at William Buck?
Well, I was involved in the recruiting back a few years after I started. So we're talking back in 2002 when I started. So
the turn of the millennium.
The turn of the millennium. I think it was a couple of months after the World Trade Center when I started. So that's sort of how I remember it. But at that time, I remember interviewing and the discussions that we were having about the strengths and weaknesses of particular graduates when we started. And a lot of it was about how much work will they be able to do? How easy will they be to manage? And how will they get along? And we all felt like that was the right approach at the time, and I think that was the right approach at the time. What I think's changed since then is what we, and not only we, William Buck, but we, the broader profession, are expecting from our graduates. We're expecting more analytical skills, an ability to be able to attract business, build relationships. There's a lot more that we're after these days. So it's I guess a far broader assessment now than what it used to be, and it would be that because that's our number one path into our business is through the recruitment of graduates, and we're looking for different skills amongst all of those graduates because we recognise that that's what our business needs going forward, and even though it's a very short time to get an impression of someone, you still got to be able to do it, and to think, well, how's this person going to fit into our business, and how are we going to get these other elements that we're looking for from the crop of people that we're taking on.
But it's such a more well-rounded approach as well. I heard that Justice Scalia, who was a Supreme Court judge in the US, would only take associates who'd been to Harvard Business School, Harvard Law School, I should say, because they're the ones who get the best LSAT.
Right.
So the LSAT's the test that people do in the US to work out which law school they get to go to, basically.
Right. Yep.
And the people who do that test the best all get to go to Harvard.
Yep.
But the question is somebody who does that test well the best lawyer?
Or just someone who can do the test well?
Or just somebody who can do a test well? Whereas the way you're approaching it is a lot more thinking about different elements in people's personalities and their experience and what they can bring.
Absolutely.
Not just test score.
Yeah, and to try and align the skills of our people, because that's what we're selling. We're selling our people and their abilities
With what your clients need.
With what our clients need. And I describe it as there being less nuts and bolts around these days in accounting practices, less shoebox jobs than what there might have been in the past.
Yes.
So we've got to have people that are good with technology. There's a huge range of things that we need people to be, because we know what they're going to do down the track in their career. And so we've needed to, and again, not just us, broader profession have needed people with broader skills. And what other factor we take into account now is the fact that people will make different decisions about their career, and they're probably a bit more prepared to move to get what they want than what they have been in the past. And I think this is great, because there's an element of, if you're not in the right spot, at least you're taking some responsibility for that yourself and your career. And that can be something that just provides the best result all around, because you've got to have people that have got a passion for what they're doing and ones that can see a future career path for them. So I don't mind that the fact that that's emerged. That's one of those things. It just means that we have to hire at different points, but still very interested in taking graduates from early on.
So talking about career paths, sometimes people can go into accounting and they think it's a really simple decision, because you go in at graduate level and you take steps and you work up, and there's lots of different steps in accounting firms. But what advice do you have for people who are working as an accountant, might have been for a few years, and they're just like, this isn't what I thought it was, maybe it's not for me, how do I switch out of this?
So good idea to be able to look around at those people that you work with to say, well, look at the next obvious logical step for you, and say, is that a step that I actually want? And what are the core elements of that role that I'll be doing? And does that really get me excited? Or and not needing to overstate it, like it's not as though you're working with feverish inspiration every single day, but there needs to be enough parts of your role that really do excite you.
Yeah, you're happy to get up in the morning.
You're happy to get up in the morning. You don't want to feel like you're grinding through every day. So the always look at that step ahead and those people around you, and just consider well how much do you align and identify with them. And we've had some cases in the past where people have tried that and they've changed firms, thinking, well, potentially it's the firm, but then they realise pretty soon after they start, even with us, they think no, it's the job, and they then go and try and do something else, which I think is to be commended. But what you don't want to do is to wait for that to change, like wait for the other shoe to drop, wait for don't. My advice would be not to wait too long. People are more invested in their careers in terms of the direction that they're on. They take more control earlier than what they used to.
And I think that happens for all professionals. So you and I both work a lot with doctors.
Yep.
Doctors invest an incredible amount of time, first in med school, that's 6 years, and then as a registrar, and then
through the specialty,
moving through the specialties. And I think they often feel pretty trapped in their profession as well. So
absolutely, and I think it's the vast majority of professional careers.
You got on a train and you can't get off.
Yeah, but you can. You can get off. There's plenty of good examples of people who have changed careers that have gotten to the right spot. We've seen that before, and we sometimes talk about that to people in terms of, well, are you best in accounting terms? Are you best being in a role in practice, or are you best to look at a commerce role where you're working in one business, like the equivalent of the in-house counsel that we were talking about before, or are you best to go and do something else completely different, or government? So we've had people that have taken what I describe as sideways steps.
Yeah, and there's so many opportunities as well. So
yeah, absolutely there is.
Investigating
and you're doing yourself a big favour by doing that, and you're not doing anyone any favours by staying in a job that you're
miserable in. Yeah,
that you're miserable in, that you don't find any passion, you don't find any element of it that really makes you think, I'm happy to be at work today. I was happy I was involved in that project or with that client. Geez, I like speaking to that client when they call up. If everything is a grind all the way through,
and you're hanging out for Friday.
and you're hanging out for Friday, you're working for the weekend, then potentially you're not in the right spot. And that's also happened in the other direction, where we've taken on people from commerce that are looking for a bit more variety in what they do. You're the best person to know. And I guess you can say things to other people and make representations about yourself, but if you're deluding yourself, only you will know that.
And you're the person who's most impacted.
You're the person who's most impacted, and there are things that will happen along the way that potentially even make you grumpier about your role. So the quicker you can take control of it, the better. There are potentially some who don't give careers enough of an opportunity to flourish before they decide to jump out. So that's almost being a bit too reactive. So I would encourage those people to talk to the people that are them in 3, 4, 5 years' time, and to say, well, what changed for you between where you are or where I am now and where you are now? And what does your day look like now? And what are the parts of your job that you like? Like there's nothing wrong. I mean, people, I think, are almost too paranoid about maintaining appearances where perhaps they don't have the conviction to go and have that discussion. And I feel like that can be a really transformative discussion to have for someone, because I talk to our graduates about, the first few years there being some elements of grind work in there. Like anything that's worthwhile, you got to work hard to get. And I feel like the first few years of a professional career, whatever professional career, in accounting, it's going through and doing your chartered accountant's program. There's a bit of grind in there, and you could easily give up during that period. That's not easy, but you need to remember that anything that's worth anything that's worth sticking to, you got to put some effort into, so that you can then determine whether that's the right thing for you going forward. And I think from certainly in an accounting sense, if you're a chartered accountant, there are lots of things you can do with being a chartered accountant, but in practice, it gives you a ticket to the game to be able to then go and branch out and leverage some of those skills that you've got. But you don't get to that point unless you've done the groundwork. Unless you've done the groundwork. So you've got to stick with it for a period of time to build up those skills, to then decide, well, what am
other
I,
options are?
Yeah, what am I up for from here? And I really appreciate when people make the effort to come and speak to me about it, and it not being a reactive discussion.
Yeah, I remember having a conversation on the way back from court with one of my partners. It was about something that had happened in the firm that was a really hard thing that I'd never talked to any of the partners about. And I remember him saying, thank you so much for being brave enough to have this conversation.
Right. Okay.
And
you just thought you just saying it how it is?
Well, no, it was something that I'd kind of been holding on for months too.
Yep.
But there was that opportunity that was created in the car
Yep.
where there's no one else around.
Yeah.
I know I've
Here's
got
my
at
shot.
least kind of 7 to 10 minutes before we get back to the office.
Yep.
And you have to answer me.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah. So that worked well?
Having that space, I think, is important, and creating that for those conversations.
And showing, I guess, the wherewithal to recognise something.
Yeah.
And the courage to be able to bring it up.
Yeah.
I mean, the advice that I would give to people that are thinking about doing that is to also think about, well, what would you do in this situation if you're on the other side of the table?
Yeah.
So remember how this...
is the person I'm having the conversation with going to
Correct.
receive
And
it.
maybe you won't get 100% of that, but whenever I can recall things in the past where perhaps staff have asked for things, it's been obvious that they haven't thought about it from the firm's perspective, and that's important because there's always different agendas at play,
and
but just trying to remember it. Yeah, because I try and do that the other way and think, well, how's this? How would I imagine this staff member, this colleague is feeling, and how might I react to this discussion that I'm just about to have? So that's important to think about things from both sides of the table, both from the person that's about to have the discussion, but from the perspective of the person on the other side
you're having it with.
Yeah, correct.
What's your life motto?
Life motto. My life motto is just to have a crack. I know it's very Australian, have a crack and to back yourself. I think that potentially there's less of that these days in the professional world. But you'll never know if you don't have a crack. And that's been great for me in my career, putting your hand up for things. I mean, you will, the quickest way to build your profile is to get involved, and to put your hand up and have a crack. And I really feel like that's that. I don't have a huge amount of life mottos, but that's one that I do repeat quite often. Have a crack, see how you go, and we'll support you to do it.
Yeah, nice.
So yeah, that's my motto.
Do you have a mentor?
My dad's my mentor. Not an official or a paid mentor.
Is he an accountant?
He is. Yeah, he was my connection to the firm in the first place. And I wasn't a superstar through school or university, that's for sure. But he was my connection to the firm in the first place and got me an interview, so that was good. And he's great to bounce things off. He's been out of the profession for a few years now, but is really good on the human side, and why things might be happening the way that they are, and perhaps ways that I haven't anticipated. And I think a lot of that's born from experience, and certainly in our business that we try and appreciate that experience and how that can be translated to others. And I've got plenty of examples of things where I've asked him over the years, and he's given me a perspective that I hadn't thought of. Potentially it's a bit blunt, but sometimes blunt is what
you needed.
Yeah, is what you needed.
Is there anything I haven't asked you that I should have asked?
No, I don't think so.
What about, what would you say to 18-year-old Tom?
18-year-old Tom, 18-year-old Tom still had 4 years of messing around, so he probably wouldn't have listened. So 22-year-old Tom, I would have said to him when you had an opportunity to go and start at William Buck, to say, well, get stuck into it. Get really have a go at this and put your all into it. Like I don't feel like I was dragged kicking and screaming into a full-time role, but it certainly wasn't something that I'd thought about from a young age. And I remember comparing myself to other kids at school that said, oh, I'm going to go and be an architect, or I'm going to go and follow the law, and it just being a clearer path for other people than what it was for me. And I think what it was for me in the end was that genuine interest in people. It just so happened to translate into accounting, and then to William Buck, and then business advisory, but all of that, underneath all of that was relationships, and building relationships. And I feel like that's hugely important, and I really value my relationships with my clients, and lots of them are friends, and that gives me quite a bit of pride in my career. So what I'd say to the younger me is just to get on with it. But equally, I feel like those 4 years between 18 and 22, I sort of, I really enjoyed myself. I don't think it hurt me in the longer run. Had a good time. But by the time I started, I was ready for the next chapter in my life, which has been successful since.
Yay! Thanks for coming in today.
No worries. Pleasure. Thanks for having me, Sarah.
Thanks for tuning in to the podcast today. If you're still listening, you can find the show notes on our website, view.Com.au. You're welcome to go ahead and subscribe, leave a review, and share the podcast with anyone that you think might benefit from it, anyone that you think is open to helping us create a world with a purpose that's higher than profit. If you're an accountant on purpose, feel free to find our Facebook page and join our community.